Now, just checking who's going to level up next and having them kill these priests here. So in my case, I'm guessing that's Azel and Beowulf here. Well, those things are more fragile than I would have thought. I mean, taking that much from magic, they're supposed to have good resistance anyway. That was actually a pretty decent level up considering Azel's growth rates. Of course, unfortunately, Beowulf has a history for getting really bad level ups, so let's hope this one is different. Not really. Well, at least that's the one stat that's probably the most important for him. And now we can just go ahead and capture Phinora, but of course we want everyone here and healers nearby because, yeah, again, like I said, don't kill these two meteor mages yet. So we'll have to survive a few attacks from them. Which is why having Claude around is helpful. Now, there isn't really that much fighting in this part, but it's still hugely important because I may have mentioned this before, but after you capture Phinora, every character can talk to the person they're paired with. Well, it only works for certain pairings, but of course, in my case, since I've mostly gone with the implied canon pairings, I'm going to get a conversation from most people. The only conversation I won't get is Bridget, because she has hers with Jamuka, Midael, or Alec. Everyone has 3 specific characters that they'll have a conversation for. Generally speaking, their best pairings will be one of these 3, so most players will generally see these conversations. And some of them reveal some pretty interesting things. None of them give any actual stat boosts or items, but they're very important in terms of the story. Right now, I guess it's time to capture Phinora. Yeah, I just kind of realised that it has uncharacteristically green plains in the middle of a desert, so yeah, it's probably meant to be some sort of oasis, really. And, of course, here it comes. Yeah, the term bittersweet victory really just doesn't cover this at all. In fact, that's why it doesn't even use the bittersweet victory theme. It actually uses, yes, that's actually the game over theme. Of course, before Sigurd gets a chance to react to that, the last one of the traitors has shown up with a very, very large army. And this is set to be, this is the last major battle of this chapter, and the last battle of the first generation. Really. As you'll see, that foreshadows something, but yes, now, essentially, yes, that line there, it is true, none of them will move until you get within range of them. So you technically have to cross the whole desert with meteor mages attacking you before you'll get a chance to fight him. Of course, there is a way to avert this, which I'm going to show. It's a tactic I learned off a certain walkthrough. It probably doesn't exist anymore, actually, though, unfortunately. But it involves Fury. So she needs to be quite decently leveled for this to work. But that will really have to be shown in the next part, because now it's time for the conversations. So, alright, first we'll have this one. Because a lot of these use music tracks that haven't been used very much or at all earlier. So, this conversation actually reveals Holyn's origins. As was hinted at by his minor Odo blood, Holyn comes from a certain minor ruling family of Isaac. One of the different noble classes there. Now, Claude and Sylvia's doesn't really reveal anything new, but... well, there's something there that will make more sense a bit later. Right, who's next? Okay, now this one, Lachesis and Beowulf, this is probably one of the more significant ones story-wise. Certainly explains a lot of issues regarding Lachesis' pairings in general. It's also translated as, I've known your true feelings all along. But anyway, I'll need to talk about this a bit longer because essentially what this implies is that Beowulf believes that Lachesis is in love with Finn. Some people think it implies that she had an affair with him, but not entirely sure about that, but still. Alright, here's Levin and Fury's one. But anyway, regarding Lachesis and Beowulf, there's a lot of debate as to who Lachesis' canon pairing is. I mean, Fire Emblem 5 sort of implies Finn, this game seems to more imply Beowulf. But, based on that conversation, my view is that both pairings are at least partially canon. Basically, she is with Beowulf now, and after the events of this chapter, she goes to Leinster where Finn is. And anyway, Levin and Fury's conversation back there really doesn't really tell us that much that's new, really. But still, it's interesting to see. That conversation was actually pretty important because you won't know it now, but what happens to Tailtiu and her children is actually a pretty major subplot in the second generation, and that conversation is pretty much a lead up to it in a way. I won't attempt to spoil any more. Also, note that Edain doesn't get a conversation, but that's because hers actually happened in Chapter 4. With either Jamuka, Midael, or Azel. And they actually got an item out of it. And of course now, really, you can try and go through the desert and get bombarded by meteors to reach Reptor's massive army. or you can use the approach I'm taking. But now is definitely the best time to start preparing your character's inventories for inheritance. I think I'll show that directly in a later part, but just make sure your character's weapons are, well, their best ones are fully repaired, and it's generally best to plan ahead what items you want to give to what children. Of course, I'll also show this later, but for the people who aren't being paired, well, it really doesn't matter what you do with their items, but for the people who are, you've got to make sure that you sell items that the children can't inherit. Otherwise, you will lose them for a significant amount of time. Again, I'm going to give full explanations for this stuff later. And as you can see here, his army is pretty powerful, but that's nothing compared to Reptor himself, who has the legendary Thunder Spell, and some pretty massive stats, and something that's kind of interesting, you'll notice he has 30 magic. That's actually above the cap of the Baron class. So yeah, his stats literally break the game. Of course, later on you'll find he's nowhere near as tough as he seems. But that's for later. Right now it's time for more meteor dodging. There is a good reason we're surviving all of these meteors.